Welcome to Redefining Engagement. I'm Francesca, Director of Audience Development and Strategy at Contribly. And in this show, I speak to leaders and innovators in the media industry so that we can bring tips, wisdom, ideas, and even some things to avoid so that we can all do more engagement better. So without further ado, let's move on to our next guest. Hi, Fabienne. Thank you so much for joining me to talk a little bit about engagement. How about we start off with a little introduction? Can you tell me a bit about you and your career so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work at the intersection of journalism, product strategy, and audience engagement. My background spans working with news organizations across Europe and the United States to build sustainable news products, helping them understand their audiences and implementing product thinking principles in journalism. Right now, I work as the head of journalism products at OCCRP. I write a newsletter about product thinking for journalism professionals in the Netherlands, and I work as an innovation consultant and trainer for news organizations, news supporting organizations like the International Press Institute in Vienna.
You have so many hats.
Yes.
How did you get to this point? Like, what was your journey, out of curiosity?
I want to say my origin story, it all started at Stanford. I did my master's program there, which was a fantastic opportunity. And at that time, which was, I'm really bad at maths, a long time ago now. I remember that was the first time I learned about product thinking. It wasn't a big thing in newsrooms at the time, but obviously product thinking has come from tech, and Stanford is the tech university. So it was already being taught there in classes. And I started thinking maybe there's something about design thinking and product thinking principles that we can apply to journalism, but I didn't really do something with it at the time. I went on to become a data journalist in Belgium. And when I saw on Twitter, which was still a normal place to hang out at the time, that the News Product Alliance had formed and that it was hosting its inaugural summit, I was like, wait, that is exactly what I wanted. And that is exactly what I wanted to do. And so I decided to go to the summit. I found my people, as they like to say, and I realized this is what I want my career to be. So I changed my trajectory. I applied all the things that I taught at Stanford in like innovation consultancy roles for newsrooms and grew out my portfolio. And now I'm here.
And here we are.
Yes.
And now you're thinking about all the things that we're thinking about, that we're talking about constantly, which is all around engagement. And that's good fun as well. What is your definition of engagement?
So for me, audience engagement is about meaningful interactions, building relationships between news organizations and the communities that they serve. I know that for the longest time, due to platforms as well, we've kind of identified audience engagement as clicks and shares and scroll depth and read time, and all those behavioral metrics are signals, yes, but true engagement is about connections between people. It happens when an audience sees value in what you make, returns for more, feels like their experience matters. It's about trust, participation, making journalism more useful, not just more visible.
And that is a really good definition. Very hard to measure, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Has that definition changed throughout your time, or?
I want to say, for me, like audience research and audience engagement have always been very tightly coupled, but there's a difference between what Patrick Buehler calls tactical research and strategic research. And in newsrooms, we've been very focused on the tactical part of things. So removing hurdles to get people to consume more of our journalism, engage more with our existing journalism, whereas the strategic question would be, what kind of journalism should we be making in order to serve our communities? Audiences are global, but communities don't really scale beyond a certain point. And I feel like in most newsrooms, we're still over-focusing on finding the right tricks to get people to consume what we were going to make anyway. And rather, we should focus on letting our journalism be in the service of the communities that we serve. And that is a shift that I personally made over the past couple of years.
So almost moving away from it just being content for everyone to serving a bigger purpose than just content for the communities.
Yeah, and also just not just saying we wanted to make this anyway, and now we're going to find the perfect way to make you engage with it, but rather ask, do people really need this? And if
Mm.
not, what do they need? What do they need to be that informed citizen that we as journalists claim we want them to be? Um, I feel like often we're still, as journalists, looking down on our audiences. We're not meeting them at eye level. And in order to really do audience engagement well, we have to reframe that relationship and be more equal in how we approach each other.
It's so I'm picking up on one sentence, right? Like the person that we want them to be. Like any other product in the world, like usually the product serves a problem that someone has, but we're almost like, no, we want to make you better. Like,
Yeah.
oh, it's interesting because there's a little bit of a twist on that.
Yeah. It's
That's
aspirational.
yeah.
Journalists are idealists. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gone into this profession. Like, it's par for the course that if you're a journalist who want to make the world a better place with your stories, you believe that that is possible,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel very strongly that what you write about or what you make videos about, what you make is something that people ought to consume, that people ought to see or read in order to be that informed citizen. And even though that comes from a good place, the result is often that we seem standoffish, arrogant, out of
Mm-hmm.
touch with what people really need. And so I like the concept journalism as a service, where we information isn't important in a vacuum. Like journalism isn't intrinsically useful. I like to compare this to someone who bakes bread. Like, okay, great, you make this awesome loaf of bread, and then no one eats it. And then you have to throw it out at the end of the day. It's like, well, I'm sure it was really nutritious and probably tasted really well, but since no one ate it, now it's in the trash and it wasn't useful at all. Same with journalism. So,
Yeah. And that, I guess we're hinting a little bit on like what the aims are of engagement. Like when we're
right.
devising up an engagement strategy and we're thinking like why should news brands be more engaging,
Yeah.
that's basically that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think audience engagement isn't not a nice to have. It's very fundamental to our sustainability as a profession. Um, and without engagement, you're not building a community. You're just like broadcasting into the void. We have the opportunity to be really important in the upcoming years, given all the, let's call them less than ideal developments around the world.
Mhm.
But we have to stop looking down on the people we're producing these stories for. And we're currently not meeting people at eye level. And that should change because it's eroding trust in what we do.
Mm.
And if we don't have that trust, then we will not have an impact at all.
And you're like, I'm loving the definition. However, going back to the harder, like, how do we measure if we're doing a good job?
Yeah,
That's very difficult in the scenario that you're providing.
it
How do
is.
you think we measure that?
So I think you're hitting the nail right on the head because we like to measure what's easy
Mm.
rather than what matters.
Mm-hmm.
We have tools and dashboards that give us all these nice statistics, and we think that because they're in the dashboard, we need to care about them. So we start caring about them. Page views, time on page, they're all proxies. They don't really actually tell us whether people find value in our work. At best, they're a weak approximation of that, and
Mm.
at worst, they're just completely useless. So a better way to measure engagement is through a mix of, well, behavioral signals, they still matter, like return visits, completion rates, newsletter retention, that kind of stuff. But you need those qualitative insights as well. You need to talk to people, or rather listen to people, ask them
Mm-hmm.
questions and let them talk to you. What kind of feedback are they giving you? Um, Talk to people on the street if you're a local outlet. If you're global, like OCCRP is, we try to do interviews as often as we can. But also community actions, comments, referrals, participation in live events if you host them. For example, OCCRP does AMAs sometimes on Reddit when we produce big projects, and we've seen that those are generally really well liked. We like to pick the right subreddits that already engage with our journalism before we got there, and it's been really interesting to collaborate with the community in that way. And it's something that our newsroom is not super used to doing. So it's a process. But you see that there's a huge difference between simply looking at the behavioral signals and actually talking to people. For example, I did a user interview last week with a Gen Z girl who was, I want to say, like 19 years old. She lived in Spain, and she told me all about how she loved OCCRP's YouTube channel. And I was amazed because I never thought I'd find a person like her, because she's not in our core audience right now, and we're trying to move towards attracting more audience members like hers, but it's a process. And so in the data, I wouldn't really say like, oh, we're achieving that, but talking to someone, understanding, hey, this is the value we're providing for this person. We can use that information to make better products that I wouldn't be able to just get out of the behavioral signals in a dashboard.
That's really interesting. What other kind of things did you learn from doing like the Reddit stuff? Were there any other surprising like insights that came out of it?
I think so the Reddit community is really interesting. Here's another, like, there's no one size fits all approach to audience engagement. Like every platform is different, every community is different. I strongly believe you have to invest in a community before asking things of that community, because otherwise you're just coming in there, asking your questions, going away. So that's why I said we tried to pick Reddit subreddits that already engage with our journalism, where we saw that they were having conversations about our work. Because otherwise, Reddit is a very distrustful place, especially of institutions. So if you just come in there and be like, hello, we are OCCRP, a very nondescript niche journalism organization, we want to host an AMA, they're like, nah, no thanks. So we handpicked those communities. We made sure to be really respectful in advance, and tell people what we're all about, be very upfront about what we were going to do, give people the opportunity to ask questions. And OCCRP is an organization that is interesting for a lot of different reasons. And so people also have questions about the organization itself rather than just the work that we do. So we have found that whenever we open up our community questions, people will also ask questions about how are you funded? How do you ensure that there's no bias? And I think rather than ignoring those questions because they're not on topic, it shows your credibility as an organization if you really go into those questions and be open, transparent, hold yourself accountable. Because if you don't do that, you'll be perceived as, oh, look, it's another news organization who's trying to hide things, even if that's not the case. And again,
Sometimes
that's about,
you gotta go back to basics, don't you? Like,
yeah, build a relationship with people as you would as a person. And it's harder in communities where you feel that there's some apprehension, like you have to do more and harder work. But I do believe that that work is worth it, because communities are getting more and more fragmented. We see that there's no next big platform. I read yesterday somewhere that LinkedIn as on LinkedIn that like Gen Z as the new big up and coming generation is also more fragmented than the millennials that I subscribe to being a millennial. Hello.
Same here. Yeah.
So they're more fragmented. We're very old. And so there is no one, like I said, there is no one size fits all approach. You need to go back to basics. You need to show up as a human rather than as an institution. And I think that is something that Julia Angwin describes really well in her essay. Julia Angwin is the founder of the Markup, among other news organizations. She was a Harvard Shorenstein Fellow last year, and she wrote this really interesting essay where she compares the trustworthiness of online content creators to the trustworthiness of traditional news outlets in the same online spaces. And one of the things that she mentioned that really resonated with me is that news institutions came into these spaces with the attitude of, you should trust us because we've been around for so many years. And the creators came into those spaces thinking, I have no credibility whatsoever, and I need to build that from the ground up. And that's why right now those creators are trusted much more than the institutions, because the institutions have done no work whatsoever to show why we should trust them. And yeah.
Oh my God, it's so true. So true. And we have a marketing problem. The creators knew from the moment they started, they're like, we need to work on our marketing. We need to make sure that people understand what we stand for, what we're all about. We've not really done that.
No, we assume people know, and people don't know.
We always assume, don't we?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
So easy. And then when we are doing this engagement, when like let's say we're not trying to get people to know who we are, but we are actually trying to engage with these people.
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest challenges are? What are the hurdles that are stopping us from engaging better?
I think newsrooms are prioritizing output over outcomes very often. We focus on producing journalism, good journalism, but we don't think enough about how people experience that journalism. And that also comes back to audience engagement, like be where people are, be where they are, meet them where they're at, meet them at eye level. We are here thinking of ourselves as makers, which is great, but our audience is somewhere over there, like maybe even outside the frame. And we're not doing that much of an effort. Like I want to say, obviously I'm generalizing, there are outlets who are doing great things in this space, but overall, the media ecosystem is very maker focused and relies on platform metrics too much. Like I said before, like engagement on social media is not the same as a long, deep relationship with your brand. Many newsrooms assume, like you just said, that they know what their audience wants instead of actually listening. And there's a lot of short-term thinking. Engagement takes time. You can't just do a campaign and expect deep loyalty overnight. So you need to build that. You need to take time. But in the age of we get instant results on everything and you can see all the metrics from the day we posted. And I'm guilty of this too. Like if we launch a YouTube short, I am looking at our dashboard and comparing the stats. Like, oh, wait, this is performing. Whereas I really have to check myself. Like this is addictive because the platforms make it addictive to look at the numbers. Numbers go up, yay. But it's not a stand-in for actual value.
I'm really interested in the like we are here and our audiences over there, maybe outside of that, because we're constantly worrying. We've been bitten as news brands, news organizations. We've been bitten in the ass so many times for doing everything on the platforms, and then the platforms changing their mind in any sense, and then all of a sudden we're kind of stuck. How is there a world where this trust is built up so much that they are coming to us or meeting us somewhere a little bit closer? Is that the aim in your mind?
Yeah, no, I completely buy into the shift from borrowed to owned audiences. But here's the thing, like say that we as collective news organizations, we decide, okay, we're gonna, get off of all the socials because the socials suck and they're owned by these mega corporations who have their own best interests at heart and not ours. And we only post our news on our own websites, our own apps. That's it. We'll be dead in the water because people don't go to our websites or our apps if they don't already know us. So all of those people who don't know you yet, who haven't built a relationship with you yet, will not build a relationship with you unless through word of mouth, someone's like, hey, did you know that this is a great outlet and you should check them out? But people aren't on our websites. There's like an internet law that says like 99% of time people spend time, like their time on websites that aren't yours or platforms that aren't yours. And that's about usability, but it also applies to this. Like people don't spend the majority of their time looking for your content, especially not younger generations. So yes, I buy into the idea of that shift from borrowed to owned audiences, but I also believe that there is value in every part of I used to call it funnel, but I like the word engagement loops a little bit more now.
Yes, I totally agree on that one. Yeah, that's what we're calling it too.
And what I like about that is that it shifts your mind from thinking we should get people down to funnel to saying, but there are loops at every stage, and all of those loops are worth exploring. Kevin Charman Anderson, who is also a member of the MPA, and I did we hosted a session at the MPA Summit last year about this specific phenomenon where we use the metaphor of relationships to help people understand what it means. Because if you look at, for example, search, like Google search, that is your meet cute, so to speak. That is your first encounter with an outlet, a potential partner or friend. And then social media are like the first couple of dates. You're trying to make a good impression. You're still kind of testing the waters. It's still very like kind of superficial, but there's potential for more. And then some people become friends, and they might, start following your newsletter, or they might start listening to your podcast, or they take that one step closer to that owned platform. And some people you'll get into a very deep relationship with, and they'll move in with you, and they'll get a key to your house, and then they become a subscriber or a member, and they want to have a really close connection with you. And then you also have the zombies, the people who churned because you had a relationship with them, and they're kind of still out there, but they're not really connected to you anymore. But you have an opportunity maybe to, get them back into your life if you want to. Maybe you don't, but maybe you do. And so if you look at it from that point of view, we have a lot of friends. Usually, if you subscribe to monogamy, then you only have one partner, but even in like right now, that's different. So it depends on the kind of relationship that you subscribe to. But we can agree that you'll never usually have as many partners as you have friends. And there are even more people outside of that who are like vague acquaintances or people you haven't even met yet. And so that is similar to a funnel. But I'm not saying that my partner is more worthwhile to me than my friend. It's a different type of relationship. And if we apply that lens to all these different audience members and all these different products that we can offer to them, we can understand that, yes, some people will stick at the social media level and they will never pay us for our content, for our journalism, but there's still value in that relationship. They might do other things for us, with us. We might monetize them in another way. Branded content, sponsorships, all that stuff that traditional media is kind of hesitant to lean into. But if we apply that lens, then we can see that it's not just a matter of we need to get as many people to subscribe to our content as possible, but we need to cultivate relationships at every level and entice people, if they want to build that deeper relationship with us, but also understand how we can still have a meaningful, valuable relationship if we don't go that deep.
Yeah. Oh my God, I hate the dating apps, but that example is so good.
I will say it was Kevin's, it wasn't mine, but I'm just putting it out there because I think it works really well.
It really does. And for anyone who doesn't know the whole zombies thing, there is so much value in that as well. Because with my friends, we talk about it all the time. Like, you date someone and they disappear and then they come back like a few weeks later for no reason, and they just randomly come in. But there's no reason that they might not be the next person to introduce you to someone else that might be also valuable. So, good old zombies. And let's have a little dive into like strategies for a second. What strategies have proven most effective in engaging audiences in your experience?
So last year I went to Riga for a conference, and I saw a talk there from the head of games at the New York Times. And he mentioned something really interesting to me, which is that they see, obviously, like the New York Times is in a league of its own. And so whenever I listen to a talk from the New York Times, I'm always like, how can I extract value from this that applies at the level that is not the New York Times? And I think the level of value that I found in this presentation is that different products build habits at different frequencies. So news products are cyclical. News goes in cycles. Some people are news junkies and they come every day, but more often what they saw at the New York Times is that people come back for news like on a monthly basis. But games, that's a daily habit. That is something people come back for every day. Like, remember the Wordle craze during COVID times? We were all doing that. So creating habit building products to have those regular touch points with your audiences, but also understand that not every product has the same frequency of habit. And you cannot make everyone come back to news every single day, and nor should you want to. But you can think about what other products can we offer that people will engage with more often, less often, to build this diverse palette of offerings that will create those regular touch points. So that's one strategy that I think is really effective.
Love that.
There is conversational journalism, which I also like from a design thinking perspective. Don't just report at people, report with them. I love how Harka and Jennifer Brendel has, put this forward for years already. Like, audience engagement starts after publication. What about we start it before publication? And it makes so much sense because people become part of the process. They feel seen, they feel heard. I used to work at a newsroom that had a focus group of subscribers who they would occasionally plug into to ask them about, this is happening in the world. We are thinking of writing about this and this. What questions do you have that you don't see answered in the news right now? And to come back to that behavioral data, they saw that those articles were read about 6 times better than everything else that they put out. So people care about seeing what they are thinking about reflected in the news that they consume. Because you have a question, you see it answered, that is interesting.
You're getting a buy-in as well, aren't you?
Right.
It's
yeah.
Totally.
You're making people feel ownership, like shared ownership over what comes out of that. And there's also like I said, journalism as a service, utility-focused content that helps people solve problems in their lives is a great way, especially for local news. Help people connect with their communities, help people connect with their surroundings, help them make sense of the world around them. That is so valuable. And I know that service journalism gets such a bad rep because it's not cool, investigative, da 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 da. But to give you an example of great service journalism that we did at OCCRP, which is peak investigative court style journalism about organized crime and corruption, not your most palatable topics. Last week, we launched a huge investigation called Scam Empire about people in Georgia and other countries who were scamming at a massive level, 35 million euros in profits, people from all over the world, mainly Western countries. And one piece of service journalism that we put out as part of that investigation package was, how can you recognize if you're being targeted by a scammer? And that is such a shareable, it was a short video, it was very snackable, very shareable. That is utility journalism. That is helping people understand the personal relevance to that big story. And thinking about, you don't have to not do the big investigation, but it's about what different types of journalism can I produce that can help different people at different needs, different levels.
Love that. Making it so relatable when it is such a massive thing is so important, isn't it? And you kind of mentioned a few of the bits around at what point do we engage with our audiences? As you're doing it at the moment, what point are you considering them? Is it all the way through? Are you quite good at doing that? When does it happen?
I want to say that I'm quite good at doing it, but it depends on the newsroom you're working with, how well you can execute, obviously. So I have been in constant communication with our newsroom team, who, by the way, they're awesome. Our editors are amazing. But they are very focused on producing their journalism because those investigations take months to produce. So they're not really thinking about audience engagement all the time. So what I try to do is become part of the process as soon as possible. I think audience engagement should be baked in from the start. And that means it should be part of editorial planning. It should be part of product decisions. It should be part of distribution. And so what I've tried to do within OCCRP is say, okay, right now we are like a specialty cheese shop where we sell awesome cheese, and cheese lovers know how to find us. But not everyone likes cheese, and not everyone wants to eat cheese every day. So rather than saying everyone should eat our cheese, if we want to reach a wider audience, we should think about becoming more like a grocery store where you have different products for everyone, because the grocery store has the dog food and the gluten-free food and the vegan meat and the wine and the cheese and the this and the that. So they cater to all these different types of people with all these different types of need, not because they have one product and they sell it really well, but because they have something for everyone. And we can't just turn into like a big supermarket from the specialty cheese store, but you can start offering more products that would go well with cheese, like wine.
And dog food.
And well, not dog food maybe, but like crackers, or maybe start selling vegan cheese, for example, just to stay within the analogy. But the idea was, okay, we have these different segments of audiences, three big ones. Like we have the professional audience who reads us because they're, for example, in due diligence or in prosecution, they really use our work to determine whether or not someone should get a bank account, for example, or whether someone should be indicted. And there's also this kind of adjacent group who I call the cosmopolitans, who are working in like academics or in media or in Brussels, like they're the Eurocrats, and they use our journalism to understand what's going on in the world and how that maybe affects their own work. So it's still work related, but a little bit less so. It also involves people like activists, people who are really interested about the world around them, like political junkies who care about what's going on in the world. There's the local audiences who OCCRP produces journalism that is really relevant for people who live in countries where there is no independent journalism available often, like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. So we are often uniquely positioned to help people understand what's going on in their country in an unbiased way. And there's also, this is kind of like the dog food for us, which is the entertainment audience, because there's a huge market for true crime content. OCCRP is all about crime and corruption. Our stories have such a huge potential in terms of being not only journalistically solid, but also really entertaining. But it requires
the Netflix.
Yeah.
Oh,
the next Netflix, yeah.
Thank you.
So we relaunched our YouTube account, and last year we launched as a pilot a mini documentary called The Chilling Story of the Human Slaughterhouse in Serbia, because there was this whole story. We reported on this years ago already, that we reformatted into a documentary form about a gang in Serbia who, Fargo style, killed people. I'm not gonna like elaborate on this because this needs to be safe for work, but you can look it up if you want to. And that got over 6 million views now. So we know that there is like actual hit potential with the stories that we write. And so I wanted to make sure that those audiences, those segments are front of mind whenever we start producing journalism. So it's like, okay, we have this huge story. How can we cater to these different audiences? And we have to do that before we even write all the different like bits and pieces, because we might need spin-off content. We might need to create a newsletter that is especially for this occasion. We might need to think of a mini documentary, and so we need time to produce all of that work. So the sooner you can start, long-winded way of saying, the sooner you can start, the better.
I love the analogy, the cheese shop analogy. However, I massively disagree. As a half French person, I refuse to believe that there are people that don't like cheese.
My partner doesn't eat cheese.
I will never speak to them. I will never be their friend. No, I'm joking. And what do you think some common pitfalls are in these audience engagement initiatives? I love the fact that you're trying to think about engagement from the beginning. You need the time to like properly think about it. You're aware that the journalists who are doing the work aren't potentially the first people that need to be doing it, which I think a lot of them will be very happy to hear, potentially. But what are the biggest pitfalls? What are the mistakes that we're making when we are doing this?
Assumptions. I want to say that's the number one. We think we know, but we don't.
Yeah.
because we are not our audience. And I have to keep saying this to people again and again and again. Just because we don't like the short doesn't mean that our audience will not like the short. Just because we would never watch this doesn't mean that they would not watch it. There is a fine line that we need to thread, like between going outside of our core like mission or making things that are inauthentic to our brand. But sometimes we need to accept that we are not the target audience for a certain piece of content, and that is okay.
Yeah.
Like, I am not the target audience for most of the journalism that we produce. So I will tell people, like, I don't read our stories. That is not a bad thing.
I bet they love you.
Well, actually, we do have a good relationship, but I don't read our stories because we don't have time. We don't have time. It's too long. It's too in-depth. It has all these jargon words that I don't understand, but we do want to reach people like me. So let's think about how can we repackage this into a way that makes people like me read it. And I've been talking to editors for like podcasts and other like multimedia products where they would come back to me saying, that conversation I had with you was so insightful because now I understand what you know and what you don't know. And I thought everyone knew all of these things about Russia or Serbia, but you don't know them at all. They were just genuinely amazed. And I was like, well, there are more people like me out there and they care about these stories. They think they're interesting and they would read them, but they don't have the level of pre-existing knowledge that you require them to have before they can engage with your journalism. So assuming is the big pitfall. And then I'm going to come back to my like pet peeve about metrics again.
Yeah.
We are all chasing the wrong metrics all the time because other people care about those metrics, because the dashboard makes you think that you should care about those metrics. I would like to challenge journalism organizations across the world to just take a step back and say, what do we care about? Not in terms of metrics, but in terms of like words. Put it into words. What are your goals? What do you want with your journalism? What changes in the world do you want to see? Because again, we're idealists. We care about changing the world.
Yeah.
And then go back to the question, what will you see? What will change when you are succeeding? And then what metrics would be the signals that tell you you're on the right track? I don't know if you know Goodhart's law, but it's like if the metric becomes a target, it ceases to be a good metric.
Yeah.
So sometimes I throw this in there if people are really stubborn, and I tell them the story of, say you have a customer service representative whose like North Star metric is to close as many calls as possible during the day. They could pick up the phone and immediately put down the phone again. See, I'm dating myself. This is not how a Gen Z would pick up a phone. They would do this.
Oh, I know. I did the same thing.
Yeah, dating myself, but it's okay. So pick up the phone, immediately put down the phone. They have helped absolutely no person, but look, they close 50 calls, 60 calls during the day, so they must be super successful. So as soon as you let that sink in, like, hey, the way we pick our metrics is probably shaping how we do our work because we want to achieve something and like see the metrics go up, that is when you can change that frame and start thinking about, no, what do we actually care about? And what are the signals that are going to tell us if we're on the right track? So those, I think, are the two biggest pitfalls.
Those are fantastic pitfalls. And they really are, because they're so clear. And I think almost everyone is making those mistakes every single day.
I am too. I have to check myself constantly.
Oh, but even just booking, I don't know, an event with friends on the weekend. We do it every single day in our normal lives. So of course we're going to be doing it in work as well. Like 100%. I'll assume that my friend doesn't want to go to that one place because, last time she didn't really like the wine and they serve more wine like that. So I won't even suggest it. And maybe we do it every day. Obviously I bring it back to everyday kind of stuff, but and then I guess when we talk about measurement, we also think of technology and where that's going. What role do you think tech like AI, data analytics, all of
Hmm.
the stuff that's coming up and talked about all of the time, what role does that play in engagement, in your opinion?
Yeah. I mean, so obviously I use it every day. I have a subscription to ChatGPT and I use it. So I'm not against AI, but I do loathe the generalizations we're making about it because I also study a little bit of machine learning. So I have made my own machine learning models, and it's like everything we're talking about now is just machine learning. It's not that cool. It's not that hip. It's been around for years. We're just putting a new sticker on it and making it sound crazy.
Yeah.
But I do think that they are powerful tools if we can use them responsibly. Like, for example, personal relevance is one of the most important factors in increasing trust and willingness to pay in journalism. This is not something I just pulled out of my head. It's actually a research study done by Agnes Stenbaum of the Schibsted Media Innovation Lab. And what that makes me understand is that if we want to have personal relevance, AIs, well, we know algorithms are fantastically suited to give us that personal relevance. So having those smart recommendations, serving audience content based on actual interest, not just on past clicks, that can be really helpful, but we will need to do it out in the open and give people the opportunity to opt in or opt out rather than just smack it onto everything. There's also, this is a very niche use case, but specifically for example, outlets like OCCRP who are also very relevant for people in professional communities. I have found that I've talked to people who said, we use your content, but we want to extract very specific bits and pieces from it rather than just read the whole 10K word article. And so now I'm thinking maybe we should implement an AI tool on our website that can help those researchers, for example, dig through our archives and find the most relevant information that they need, make it into a neat little summary that they can copy and then paste into whatever they need. The trick obviously is not letting it hallucinate any content, just finding.
Yeah, that's hard.
That is the hard part. But helping researchers who use journalism content, for example, in our use case, to collect what they need and then summarize it neatly, that is a really nice way to use AI. Data to spot patterns, identify habit-forming behaviors. There was a really cool session at the MPA Summit that showed how you can use Google Analytics, for example, to create these user journeys to answer questions like, hey, if I have a group of people who is behaving like this, like a specific cohort of people who are doing exactly what I want them to do, what characteristics do they have in their behavior? And what can I learn from that to help other people behave more similarly? And so how can I get people, for example, to become a more frequently returning user? Because we know that there's a correlation between returning and subscribing, or returning and buying. And this is all about understanding patterns in your data that are really hard for a human to sometimes see, but data at a really high level, obviously that's what AI is really good at, finding those patterns, recognizing those patterns. So that is something that AI is really useful for. I'm going to steer clear of the let AI help you with writing because it feels very like obvious.
Yeah.
And also it's less related to the engagement work or the product work. But I use AI, specifically ChatGPT, a lot for brainstorming. And so when I'm doing user research, I will do my own analysis and then give my data to ChatGPT and say, hey, let you do an analysis and we'll compare notes. I still like to treat AI as a very enthusiastic intern. And I think AI can help us do more with our existing technology, our existing data. But the challenge is to, how do I put this? I've been obsessed the past couple of weeks with the idea that if we rely on AI in situations where we don't have the required knowledge to assess the output, that not only will it harm your critical thinking skills, but also that it will produce worse results because you cannot control or like correct the output. I saw this, I'm sorry, my brain is going all over the place. I saw this really cool meme on Instagram the other day that said, AI has all the knowledge about things that I know nothing about, but is wrong 40% of the time in themes where I'm an expert on. I'm not going to think about this at all. And that captured it for me so perfectly, which is like, you need, as a person, to still be on top of whatever you are doing in order to assess the validity of the output that any generative AI will give to you. And if you do not have that knowledge, if you do not have that ability to be above that level, then you cannot trust the output because you cannot check if it's correct. And that is the big challenge here. And that is why I only use generative AI to be a brainstorming partner and ask me questions rather than letting it do stuff for me.
I love that idea of seeing it as a little enthusiastic intern because it makes so much sense. And I think, well, as an ex-teacher, there's a bit of me that keeps thinking we need to describe it like that to all of the young people coming in at the moment as well. Definitely. And is that where you see the future of audience engagement then in the next few years? It's around the personalization, it's around using AI to make it better to build habits and understand our audience better. Is that how you see?
Yeah, I would say AI can be used to enhance news discovery in a time where that is really hard, like making sure that we connect the right audiences with the right journalism for them, even if that means repackaging some of the existing work to make it more palatable for that specific audience. Again, without hallucinating, this is that's the big issue. And then there's also like I said, the shift from borrowed to owned. So investing more in those direct channels rather than relying on platforms. But like I said, we have to do that in a conscious way. We have to understand that we have to build the relationship on platform first before we can move people off platform. And I believe that there is going to be a shift in those fragmented communities where it goes from passive consumption to participation, community-driven journalism that is more interactive, that is hopefully more at eye level, more local, more niche. We're already seeing this, but I think that trend will continue.
Totally agree. Well, one last question for you, because why not? If you were going to give someone an engagement hack. So let's say they're starting off, they're at the beginning of their engagement journey, or they're really just starting to properly think about it. What would you say that one hack might be?
A hack. Start with your audience.
Okay.
Start with your audience. Talk to your audience before you need them. Build that relationship by giving before asking.
Before you need them.
Exactly.
And what do you mean by talk to your audience? Are we like direct, or is it actually get them involved in stuff that's a little bit more fun and engaging so that the relationship is built up enough to, what do you mean by that?
I'm going to give you a very specific example from a team that I coached actually at an an incubator program last year. And they developed what they call the circle method, which is where journalists step out of their journalist role for a day or like a couple of hours. And they go outside on, well, preferably a sunny day, but you can also do it inside with different tools. And you grab a piece of chalk and you draw a huge circle on the ground. And then you just stand on the side of the circle and you say nothing. And people stop by and they might look like, what's this person doing with this circle? And you ask them, hey, do you have a question? And I'd be like, yeah, what are you doing here? Like, well, we're standing here. We're trying to connect with people today. Can you tell me what your day was like for you today? And just engage in conversation. No ulterior motive. You're not trying to find a story. You're not trying to sell them anything. You're just trying to build that connection. And journalists who step out of that role for a little bit can find connection as a human, as a citizen, as part of that local community that they wouldn't have had if they would have said, hey, I'm a journalist and I am looking to write about XYZ, especially with certain groups that feel marginalized or like are marginalized in our society and feel misrepresented in traditional media. And so that I think is a prime example of talking to your audience before you meet them. Is you're not asking anything of them rather than just building that relationship. And then, yeah, it's also fun
Yeah.
Because I've seen this in practice, and people will say, I haven't had such a great conversation in days. Like, thank you for listening to me, and thank you for giving me time to speak and think. And that is, being a good facilitator of conversations is so powerful. We need to use that. And all journalists are capable of doing this, so we should lean into that.
That is such a fantastic hack. I love it. Thank you so much. This was such a
Absolutely.
great chat. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Me too.